I'm just going to turn it on. I don't know that the quality is going to be real good, but so Jesse. Oh, sorry about that. So I got out because I thought you might come. I probably have your final paper. It's good enough. My grandpa always said good enough for who it's for. You can take Simeon's to him.
Okay. Oh, I forgot. I get my final essay. All right.
Jesse, did you put your name on it?
Yes.
Okay. Rat. Did you? Is it typed or handwritten?
That's right. I didn't give you it.
Oh, okay. That is fine. I just want to not look and look for it if it's not there.
Do I not have papers?
No, it was for the junior high. See there? Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't know if he gave me one.
All the younger
I didn't see it, Jacob.
One more week of class?
Bias.
Oh, no.
So I,
Except you.
weirdly,
One more week of class for class?
suddenly
Yeah.
my finger is swollen and it won't bend. No, I'm sorry. I tell him I'm sure it was lovely, but if he did it, it was lovely, but I don't have it, so. All right, so Karsten, and nicely done. Okay, I have a late, would Aristotle consider modern Americans happy with no, I don't know, singer, Gabby. Did anybody give me a, like, does this look familiar to somebody?
It's not mine, but I gave you one.
I don't know whose this is. I will just save it. And those of you who are coming back and doing Scholite in the fall, I'll just bring them all the first week. And
I guess that typically would only be me.
yes. So I do not have, I think I've given you back everything I need. So if you brought your reading guide, and if you didn't, it's totally okay. If you're just kind of chilling and having a field trip and not bringing your reading guide, that's fine. I'm going to use mine. But what I wanted to do is go through, I had an outline in there, so you can look at it later, but I'm going to go over that, and then we're going to talk about this. Did everybody manage to did the link work okay for everybody? Were you able to read it? I'm sorry about that again. It's in volume 2. Can you make your way around? Just climb over people if you need to. I hope you like this.
Make a way.
So after we read Thucydides, I told you a little bit about what happened after it all went down, after the war. Sparta became a worse tyrant than Athens, if that is possible, from a group of people that said the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. But they did. They imposed 1,000 talent a year tax on Athens, just on Athens. So they did not want them getting strong again. And they were mean. They, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I can't remember what it said. What we said, it cost them per day or per month to put their fleet in. But this is a sizable fine, and feel free to set stuff on there, or you can just set it on that book maybe, and that the book can be a coaster. I'm very lax about coasters. And they went around the Aegean putting tyrants, like puppet rulers, in all the city-states that worked for Sparta, including a group of 30 tyrants in Athens that basically just executed the opposition, sort of bloodbath style. It's not good. So it didn't take very long before people started feeling sorry for Athens. Do you know what I mean? It's like everybody hated Athens, and then, oh, now we all feel sorry for Athens because Sparta is being so mean, and this is our lesson of history, right? What happens when you're the conqueror and you're really, really mean to the conquered? It often comes back to bite you later when you impose really harsh terms. And so they started banding together and all fighting against Sparta again, except that Sparta was having help from Persia. And this went on for several decades.
Wait, hold on. Wasn't the
Persians the one that slaughtered them at Thermopylae
Oh yeah.
and battled them at Marathon.
Oh, that was just pastime. No,
Yeah.
that's,
But that's water under the bridge. We need your money now.
hundreds of years ago.
So they they hooked up with the Persians and were getting financed by Persia. And then, interestingly, the Thebes, had a great general that rose up, and he, allied with Sparta and some other city-states, started rampaging through Greece, and actually, up to the walls of Sparta, besieged Sparta. It was a huge loss for Sparta, considering they are the #1 military guys of Greece. So they were on top for a while, except then their general died in battle. So all this is floundering around. Then they start arguing over who gets to take care of the oracle of Apollo at Delphi. Because there's a lot of really cool stuff there, a lot of valuable stuff. People are always dedicating their stuff to Apollo. And so there were certain groups that had the power to oversee it. And they started arguing over that. It's called the Sacred War, because they were fighting over the. I know.
It was
So,
more like the greedy war.
however, you might be able to understand from this very brief portrait how somebody from outside could see the unrest and say, these people are sitting ducks. I could take them out one by one. They can't get together to do anything. And this is exactly what Philip of Macedon did. Macedonia was always considered barbaric. They speak Greece, but not really, and we're not totally sure they're Greek, and we don't know, are they really legit civilized people or not? Yes, sir.
Philip was Alexander's dad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And they even only Greeks could be in the Olympic Games. And so eventually they had to have a meeting about, can Macedonians be in the Olympic Games? Are they Greek or are they not Greek? They decided they could be. So Philip had grandiose plans, and they involved attacking Persia. I am taking Persia down. Even though, at this point, it has been 150 years or so since Persia attacked them. So the only comparable war we have would be the Civil War. Do you know if suddenly the South said, yeah, we're just gonna attack the North? Like, really? That happened a long time ago. Are you not over that? That's what Philip's plan was. We're gonna attack Persia. Possibly for revenge. Probably because they had a bunch of stuff, right? And because I could be rich and powerful. But step #1 in his grandiose plan is attack Greece. Get all the Greeks together under my standard in my army, and we're going to go together. And so this caused mixed reaction in the Greek city-states. Some people, and I had in your outline, Isocrates, thought, yay, Philip's going to come and he's going to be the salvation of Greece. Because you know what? We just can't control ourselves. We keep fighting. We need somebody to come in from outside. We need an arbitrator, right? We need a mediator. And this will be great. And some people, what?
This will be great.
So some people, like Demosthenes, the famous Demosthenes, thought this was the worst thing ever. And I want to read to you. Demosthenes, do you guys remember, especially you guys from last year in the junior high class, Demosthenes is the guy who aspired to be a public speaker, an orator, because this is
the rock guy?
the rock guy. Yes, very good, Ethan. He stuttered, and he had a weak chest, like he couldn't emote. He couldn't draw a deep breath and emote, and no microphones, right? So if you're going to speak in public, you better speak up. And they say that he would just shut himself up in a room for weeks at a time so that he could do nothing but practice his oratory, and that he would go to the seashore and talk loudly over the sound of the waves, because, if you've ever been to the beach, it's really loud. and that he would put rocks in his mouth so that he would have to enunciate every sound clearly and train his mouth to do that, and came out on top as one of the greatest orators ever in Athens. So I guess the lesson is don't let, natural inabilities in you, they can be conquered, I guess, if you have a dream. Do you know what I mean?
What,
That
did he have a handicap or something, or he just was just training himself
I-
to be better?
he was just training himself to be better.
Not breathe, but he couldn't speak.
Yeah, he was just sort of sickly as a child. You know, he grew up sickly. I don't know if he had a technical. I think he just trained himself. But I mean, I'm not a fan of telling you guys you can do anything you want to do, because it's just a lie. Do not get on the roof and jump. You cannot fly. You will never fly, not in a plane or a hang glider. So just don't go there. If you exercise your arms, you're not going to fly. You can't do it. But some things we can overcome, and Demosthenes did. And so he gave a series of speeches, and we call them the Philippics because they are against Philip. The target was Philip. And this is another one of Mrs. Ferguson's supposedly famous things that you're like, no, I've never heard of that. This is not famous. Whenever speeches are made against a person, we still call them Philippics. He gave a Philippic. Occasionally you will see this in even current events if somebody's attacking someone in Congress. It's described as a Philippic. And it's because of this, yes.
An ad hominem fallacy?
Well, no. This is more like an entire speech directed against a person.
A person's argument or standpoint?
Or character or anything.
Oh, ad
Like
hominem.
just,
Not dismissing.
yeah.
You're not
Ad
attacking
hominem.
the person to avoid their argument. You're attacking the
Person because they
to
are a crummy
attack the
person.
Okay.
Did you see the difference?
Ad hominem is meant to.
So if you say something I don't like, if you make an argument I don't like, and I attack, and I say, yeah, but he eats oatmeal cookies instead of chocolate chip cookies. He's a loser. And so that would be an ad hominem. I'm attacking you, your character, and your lack of taste in cookies, to deflect from your argument. But if you're just like you're in general a crummy person and all your policies are crummy, I guess that's open season. Cicero did the same thing to Mark Antony, and they called him his Philippics. Anyway, so here is part of his third Philippic. I observe, he's talking to Athens, okay? I observe, however, that all men, and you first of all, have conceded to him, Philip, something which had been the occasion of every war that the Greeks have ever waged. And what is that? The power of doing what he likes, of calmly plundering and stripping the Greeks one by one, and of attacking their cities and reducing them to slavery. Yet your hegemony in Greece lasted 73 years, their empire. That of Sparta, 29. And in these later times, Thebes, too, gained some sort of authority after the Battle of Leuctra. But neither to you, nor to the Thebans, nor to the Spartans did the Greeks ever yet, men of Athens, concede the right of unrestricted action, or anything like it. On the contrary, when you, or rather the Athenians of that day, were thought to be showing a want of consideration in dealing with others, all felt it their duty, even those who had no grievance against them, to go to war in support of those who had been injured. Yet all the faults committed by the Spartans in those 30 years, and by our ancestors in their 70 years of supremacy, are fewer, men of Athens, than the wrongs which Philip has done to the Greeks in 13 incomplete years in which he has been coming to the top. Or rather, they're not a fraction of them. Aye, and you know this also, that the wrongs of the Greeks suffered from the Spartans, the wrongs which the Greeks suffered from the Spartans or from us, they suffered at all events at the hands of true-born sons of Greece. And they might have been regarded as the acts of a legitimate son, born to great possessions, who should be guilty of some fault or error in the management of his estate. So far he would deserve blame and reproach. Yet it could not be said that it was not one of the blood, nor the lawful heir, who was acting thus. But if some slave or illegitimate bastard had wasted and squandered what he had no right to, heavens! How much more monstrous and exasperating all would have called it. Yet they have no such qualms about Philip and his present conduct, though he is not only no Greek, nor related to the Greeks, but not even a barbarian from any place that can be named with honor, but a pestilent knave from Macedonia, where it was never yet possible to buy a decent slave. I like that ending. You can't even get a good slave from there. This guy's a jerk. This is just a taste of his speeches. But so Demosthenes won the day. He won and lost, unfortunately, because he won in the idea that he stirred them up and said, we should go fight against Philip. But they lost to Philip. Then everybody was just like, Demosthenes, you told us to do that. He kind of fell out of favor. He ended up leaving.
Did you say that Socrates was for Philip, though?
It was Socrates. Socrates had been dead for a while
Yeah,
by
I
then.
was about to question.
No, Socrates. So Philip had all of Greece under his command, and everything was set to go except for one problem. He died. He was assassinated. And
Yeah, one minor
when you're dead, it's really hard to do much. So his son, 20-year-old Alexander, became the heir to
I come into the story.
the kingdom. Yes. So let us take a look at the questions. If I suddenly yell, ouch, it's just this finger. I apologize if I suddenly yell.
What happened?
I don't know. That's the maddening thing.
That's what it is.
I'm always covered in bruises, and my husband says, what did you do? I don't know. I was cleaning something and I ran into something. I don't know. I hurt myself all the time. I have a pretty high pain threshold, and I just do things to myself, and then later I don't know. But I can't bend it. So what was Alexander like as a child? Do you remember any famous stories? Yeah, tell me one.
I did not do the reading for this week, but
Thank you for being honest.
But I have read a little bit about him, so I'm gonna try to answer.
Go
as
for
much as
it.
I can. Okay, so what he was like as a child. From what I know, he was kind of always pushing himself to be more. He was inventive and intelligent, but also really prideful and always trying to show off. There's a story where each time his father Philip would conquer a city, he would say, "You aren't leaving any cities for me to
Yes.
conquer."
Yes.
Not knowing that there was an entire world around him. Wonderful. And should I also tell the black horse story?
Oh, go
Sure,
for it.
okay.
Unless somebody else. Does somebody else want to tell a story?
Oh, I'll tell it.
Okay. Can you let him tell the horse story?
Okay. So there was this horse, named, what was his name?
Bucephalus.
Yeah, Bucephalus. And it had a white ox symbol on its forehead. I remember that in the book.
That's very
And
detailed.
so no one could really get on the horse. It was very wild and stuff. And then Alexander saw why the horse was afraid. He looked, the horse kept looking at its shadow. And so he turned his face away from the shadow. And then he got on the horse and then
Yes. Beautiful.
Yeah, I
Oh.
wouldn't be that smart in
Here,
real
just a
life.
second. Let me. Okay.
You are in real life.
Yes, so I'm going to read just the end of Plutarch's version of that story because you told it very well. He calmed the horse down, got on him, and it says, presently when he found him free from all rebelliousness, the horse, and only impatient for the course, he let him go at full speed, inciting him now with a commanding voice, and urging him also with his heel. Philip and his friends looked on at first in silence and anxiety for the result. I guess so. My kid's on that wild horse. Till seeing him turn at the end of his career and come back rejoicing and triumphing for what he had performed, they all burst out into acclamations of applause. And his father, shedding tears, it is said, for joy, kissed him as he came down from his horse, and in his transport said, O my son, look thee out a kingdom equal to and worthy of thyself, for Macedonia is too little for thee. So, you know what it reminds me of a little bit? The stories about the Themistocles. If you remember when we read about Plutarch's Life of Themistocles, he also was just very into honor. He made comments as a child when it was about Miltiades, who was the hero of Marathon. And Themistocles was a boy, right? Because Themistocles is prominent 10 years later at Salamis. And you're like, Miltiades gets all the honor. Is there going to be any honor left for me? And that same attitude. Strangely, I got to find this because the way he says it is so understatedly. And by the way, it says, here it is, that he was born the same day that the temple of Diana at Ephesus was burned. The temple, he says, took fire and was burnt while its mistress was absent, assisting at the birth of Alexander. And all the eastern soothsayers who happened to be at Ephesus, looking upon the ruin of this temple to be the forerunner of some other calamity, ran about the town, beating their faces and crying that this day had brought forth something that would prove fatal and destructive to all Asia. I like this story. But the weirdest story of all is his mother, Olympias. His mother's name is Olympias. Once, moreover, a serpent was found lying by Olympias as she slept, which more than anything else, it is said, abated Philip's passion for her. I guess so. It's like, you're creepy. I'm going to find another wife. That would abate your passion. If you found you sleep with your puppy, okay, your cat, your snake? I don't know. So, that's a very exciting sound.
I know. It's like
It makes it sound like something really special is happening.
It's a telemarketer, obviously. He wants to call me during class.
It's all right. So, because of this story, it got out that a god had visited her in snake form, and that Alexander's dad was really a god. I know. Which, okay, so if you can do golden rain and white bull and swan, you can do snake. Just saying. But, so he never really squashed these rumors. He never really, but we'll get to that later. Whether he really believed he was the child of a god or not. But so this was his youth. What was his favorite book? Does anyone know, and where did he keep it? If you didn't read it, it's fine. What?
He kept it under his pillow.
And what was the book?
It was Socrates' book, or Plato's.
Oh, older than that. Under his pillow is the right answer to the second part.
Oh, it was Homer. His book.
Odyssey?
Yeah.
Iliad.
Iliad.
The Iliad, because, and he kept that and a dagger under his pillow.
Yeah, that and the dagger.
So he's ready for everything. If he can't sleep, he reads. Somebody attacks him, he's got a dagger. Or he can whack him with the book. Or he can read and act out scenes. I mean, he's got every possibility covered.
You go over there, you're going to be Odysseus, and I'm going to be the guy that beats you up, remember?
So he went, he heads out on his expedition, okay, and he's, first of all, he's got to calm Greece down, because when they found out Philip, when they, being the Greek city-states, found out Philip was dead, and that Alexander, there's always a dicey period when you're transferring power. They decided it would be a good time to rebel against Macedonia, so Alexander had to come say, no, we're not going to do that. Yes.
Oh, sorry, no.
Is there a glare? Adjust your chair. Or if you need, I can put the shade down. Do you need, are you okay? Do you want to move?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm enjoying the sun.
Okay, I know, it feels kind of good, doesn't it? I was sitting there earlier reading.
This is good.
So he headed out, and so he went down to Greece, and there's a famous story about Diogenes. Do you remember Diogenes? Please, go ahead. I know, I'm sorry I didn't bake more cookies, but just polish them off. It's totally fine. I'm going to bake more this afternoon. Diogenes was a philosopher. He was a cynic. He was the founder of the Cynic philosophers who didn't believe in anything really. He's the guy who lived in a barrel. Do you remember I told you about the guy who lived in a barrel? And he was just really rude. And this is the most exciting day at my house. It's all right. I'm not offended. He
Here,
did.
let me show you guys.
You don't
So,
have apps.
See this right here? You just flip it. And then if you open your phone, it says silent mode on.
It's
That's
okay.
Android.
It's,
That's
you know
one for
what?
Apple product. I'm sorry. I
It's
have
okay.
Android.
Can we go? Hey, Diogenes. I give him some cookies and soda and they're out of control.
Barrel guy.
Barrel guy who did everything in public. Like he went poo in public and just he did, I know. It's just, so the story is that Alexander went to visit him because he was famous. Alexander found him lying along in the sun. When he saw so much company near him, he raised himself a little and vouchsafed to look upon Alexander. And when he kindly asked him, when Alexander asked him whether he wanted anything, "Yes," said he, "I would have you stand from between me and the sun." Get out of the sun. You're blocking the sun. That's what he wants from Alexander the Great. Alexander was so struck at this answer and surprised at the greatness of the man, who had taken so little notice of him, that he went away and he told his followers, who were laughing at the moroseness of the philosopher, that if he were not Alexander, he would choose to be Diogenes. Like, he's just awesome. He doesn't care about anyone. I'm Alexander the Great. You want anything? Yeah.
Awesome.
Get out of the sun. You're making a shadow. I'm sunbathing here.
It's like, are you alive?
So he heads across. So here's my imaginary map. You know, it's facing you, and I'm behind it, like I do. So Macedonia, and he crosses over into the Hellespont, across the Hellespont to Troy. Does anybody remember, if you read it or from last year, what does he do at Troy?
He takes it.
Is this the?
Well, yeah, but he's got to do something while he's there. He does something other than that.
Doesn't he visit a temple?
He does. More information, please.
No.
That's all you got. Okay.
Yeah.
At Troy, he sacrificed to Minerva and honored the memory of the heroes who were buried. I'm so sorry. There are M&Ms on the table if we need to dig into those next. And honored the memory of the heroes who were buried there with solemn libations, especially Achilles, whose gravestone he anointed, and with his friends, as the ancient custom is, ran naked about his sepulchre. That's an interesting custom. And crowned it with garlands, declaring how happy he esteemed him in having, while he lived, so faithful a friend, Patroclus, and when he was dead, so famous a poet to proclaim his actions. While he was viewing the rest of the antiquities and curiosities of the place, being told he might see Paris's harp, if he pleased, he said he thought it not worth looking on, but he would be glad to see that of Achilles, to which he used to sing the glories and great actions of brave men. Well, he wasn't fighting, because he was pouting. So can I just fast forward a bit into his story? So he traveled, here's Turkey, all right, and then you go around and here's Israel, and here's Egypt. Okay, so we got my map here. So
You're drawing it backward, right?
I am. I'm doing it
That's
so that
amazing.
you
Okay.
can see it.
Okay, I got it now. I was trying to draw it around.
No, I'm doing it for you, your direction.
You're doing it very well.
Thank you. If I drew it, it would not be good, but this gives me a lot of leeway if I just wave my finger around in the air. So as he's coming around, he hits a river up here, the Granicus, and he pushes all before him. But as he heads this direction, he's heading towards the Tigris and Euphrates River. He hits Issus. It's the Battle of Issus, which I don't know is a river or a town, to tell you the truth. And he meets Darius, the king of Persia, there. And listen to Plutarch's description of prior to the battle. Okay.
Imagine just living in a town and then randomly these two big rulers just come in.
I know. And then you're a tourist attraction forever.
Yeah.
Okay, so listen to this. When he had said this, he put on his helmet, having the rest of his arms on before he came out of his tent, which were a coat of the Sicilian make, girt close about him, and over that a breastpiece of thickly quilted linen, which was taken among other booty. Oh, I'm sorry, at the Battle of Issus. This is the Battle of Gaugamela. This is farther over, and this is the second meet up with Darius. The helmet, which was made by Theophilus, though of iron, was so well wrought and polished that it was as bright as the most refined silver. To this was fitted a gorget of the same metal, set with precious stones. His sword, which was the weapon he used most in fight, was given him by the king of the Cittians, and was of an admirable temper and lightness. The belt which he also wore in all engagements was of a much richer workmanship than the rest of his armor. It was the work of the ancient Helicon, who had been had been presented to him by the Rhodians as a mark of their respect to him. Does this remind you of anything?
Of when he's suiting up for battle.
This is like an Iliad arming scene. And he picked up the greaves and fastened them to his legs, and he put on his helmet, and they describe it. It's just like that. Then, next paragraph, it says, at the same time the augur Aristander, who had a white mantle about him and a crown of gold on his head, rode by and showed them that an eagle that soared just over Alexander and directed his flight toward the enemy, which so animated the beholders. In other words, there's an omen. Now we have omens from the gods. The gods are fighting for you. We have an arming scene. We have the gods are fighting for you. And then listen to the next. This is the same paragraph. Darius, now seeing all was lost, that those who were placed in front to defend him were broken and beat back upon him, that he could not turn or disengage his chariot without great difficulty, the wheels being clogged and entangled among the dead bodies, which lay in such heaps, as not only stopped, but almost covered the horses, and made them rear and grow so unruly that the frightened charioteer could govern them no longer. In this extremity was glad to quit his chariot and his arms, and mounting, it is said, upon a mare that had been taken from her foal, betook himself to flight. It sounds like Achilles chasing Hector down. The chariot wheels are clogged with bodies. The whole thing sounds like a battle from the Iliad. And I don't think that's an accident on Plutarch's part. This guy who idolizes Achilles, and he wants to be the next Achilles, gets described in his greatest battle as, and now he puts on his armor, and the gods show favorable omens, and then he goes out and he slashes, and there's dead bodies clogging the chariot wheels, just like the Iliad. Sorry, I think it's very cool that he gets, especially when Plutarch said, Achilles said, how lucky you were, Achilles, to have a great poet to commemorate your deeds. And Alexander gets Plutarch to commemorate his deeds, yeah.
I love how, like, have you guys ever watched Troy?
No, it's too violent for me. My son said I don't want to see
It
it.
shows so many inconsistencies from the Iliad. So many, like
I've heard this.
Like the clogging of dead bodies. They don't show that at all. When,
Well, I wonder
when
why
Achilles-
not.
I wonder why.
Shoot.
No, they don't.
This is the
Like,
highlight.
They just show like I don't. It's just it's not it's crazy. It's not as good.
My son was, I was just talking to I told him that what we were talking about, and my younger son said it's a shame there isn't a good movie version of the Iliad, like a true to the story, consistent version where they don't have to make editorial changes and.
The Odyssey, though. The Odyssey's more interesting.
The Odyssey would be interesting.
Let's see the Odyssey.
There isn't a
Iliad is one.
there is one that's not a bad Odyssey.
Bunch of fighting.
Tell me about the Gordian knot. I'm gonna let Jesse do it.
So there was this legend, I don't know, prophecy that whoever untied the Gordian knot would take all of Persia, and then Alexander just cut it in half. It's like that.
Just cut it in half. We're just not gonna deal with the untying. Just gonna slice it. This is a man.
Hard to untie that, like just.
He had cities to conquer, Jesse. He didn't have time to just mess with the knot. This is a man who thinks outside the
He's not
box.
fully Greek, you know. He's not kind of just like sitting down lamenting about thoughts. He's kind of practical.
He's very practical. So he goes. The Gordium is over here in Turkey. So he goes. Okay. The Battle of Issus, and Darius runs away. Okay, and then we'll deal with him later. By the way, this is our art of the week. This is a mosaic of the Battle of Issus. This is from Pompeii. Well, it doesn't look like a mosaic to me. It looks like a fresco, but it says in my art book it's a mosaic. So I do what I'm told. You know, it says it's a Mosaic, I write down. 2nd or 1st century BC from Pompeii. A copy, probably, of a famous painting from 310 BC that was commissioned by one of Alexander's generals of this battle. Here's Alexander. Here is Darius. All right. It's really an amazing, I'm gonna pass it around. Do you have time constraints on your, okay. So if I go over a little bit, we're good. Okay. When you look at it, look, this horse, first of all, is seen from the background. It's sort of rearing up. This horse is seen from an angle. This horse is collapsing. Like the angles, if you've done tried to draw anything from not straight front, do you know if you draw something at an angle, the adjustment you have to make? This is amazing. So Alexander, unfortunately, part of it is damaged, you know, but Alexander is holding a spear and he's spearing this guy through. The guy's horse is collapsing under him, and this guy has his hand on the spear, you know. But Alexander's not looking at him. Alexander is looking straight at Darius. I want you. I'm coming for you. And he's freaking out a little bit, trying to rally his guys. He is going to hop on a horse and skedaddle. And he's going to actually leave his mother, wife, and 2 daughters behind. They're not in the battle, but they are in the capital. All right? So he's just going to pull out with all the guys he can muster. Here, I won't, so you can look at it more closely. And go on the run and try to regroup. The family of Darius falls into Alexander's hands when Alexander shows up at the capital. And he treats them like the queens and royalty and princesses that they are. He makes sure they are super comfortable, makes sure no one messes with them.
That's good.
And so Darius is very worried, and he gets, your family is in Alexander's hands. What's going to happen? And they assured him nothing's going to happen because they are living the dream, you know, as far as they can in enemy hands. And eventually, Darius' mother dies. And he gives her a state funeral, like with the best that money can buy. This is the kind of man that Alexander is at the beginning. And the last question I asked you on the first page was, what are his personal habits like at the beginning? And so he's respectful. Plutarch tells us in his diet also he was most temperate, as appears, omitting many other circumstances, by what he said to Ada, whom he adopted with the title of mother, and afterwards created Queen of Caria. For when she, out of kindness, sent him every day many curious dishes and sweetmeats, and would have furnished him with some cooks and pastrymen, who were thought to have great skill, he told her he wanted none of them, his preceptor Leonidas having already given him the best, which were a night march to prepare for breakfast, and a moderate breakfast to create an appetite for supper. That's all a person needs. March at night makes you hungry for breakfast. A light breakfast makes you hungry for supper. That's how to live. I don't need a pastry cook. However, later on this morning, we will talk about some changes that he makes. But at the beginning, he's I don't know, I hate to say he's a nice guy. He's taking over the known world. But for a guy who takes over the world, he's a nice guy. Yeah, we don't read about massacres. He doesn't come into towns and massacre them. Unless, okay, this, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, what are you saying, Michelle? Unless there's stiff resistance. I'm like, they're being conquered, they should resist. But Tyre, I feel like, don't hold me to this, because I feel like I remember that the city of Tyre, which was one of the Phoenician cities, okay, we hear about Tyre and Sidon in the Bible, that they held out, and that he was pretty rough on Tyre, because they didn't give up. But it got to the point where cities would just give up when they saw him coming. It's like, yeah, we're not gonna win. And if we just give up, he's nice to us. Do you know what I mean? He lets us keep our stuff. So Darius is on the run, and so Alexander heads down and he goes to Egypt. And he consults Egyptian priests.
Oh yeah, this was really confusing.
Yes, he goes and visits the temple of Ammon. The Greeks were fond of claiming that the Egyptian god Ammon was basically Zeus. Do you remember in Herodotus how Herodotus talked about the gods of all these different people? And he's like, yeah, that's their Zeus, that's their, Hera, that's their Apollo. He just associated them with whatever gods they knew. It didn't seem to occur to him that they might be completely different gods or different entities. Like, oh, that's the king of their gods. Yeah, Zeus equals Zeus. So Ammon was basically Zeus. And remember the legends about the snake. Okay, thank you. So it says he visited the temple, then he wanted to go out into the desert. In this journey, the relief and assistance the gods afforded him in his distresses were more remarkable, and obtained greater belief than the oracles he received afterwards. For first, plentiful rains fell, and preserved them from any fear of perishing by drought, and delaying the extreme dryness of the sand, which now became moist and firm to travel on, cleared and purified the air. Besides this, when they were out of their way and were wandering up and down, because the marks which were wont to direct the guides were disordered and lost, they were set right again by some ravens, who flew before them when on their march, and waited for them when they lingered and fell behind. And the greatest miracle, as Callisthenes tells us, is if any of the company went astray in the night, the ravens, never ceased croaking and making a noise, till by that means they had brought them into the right way again. Having passed through the wilderness, they came to the place where the high priest, at the first salutation, bade Alexander welcome from his father Ammon. Whether he was serious or whether he was buttering him up, because it's got, hey, hail, son of the gods, don't kill us. Be nice. We will call you whatever you want. But it says that he privately consulted with priests. And it says in a letter to his mother, tells her there were some secret answers, which at his return he would only communicate to her. But he never returned. So we don't know what supposedly the priests said. However, Plutarch, and I told you we would revisit this idea that he's the son of the god. It is apparent that Alexander in himself was not foolishly affected, or had the vanity to think himself really a god, but merely used his claims to divinity as a means of maintaining among other people the sense of his superiority. It was useful to say, my dad is a god, that he didn't really believe it himself. So says Plutarch. So they beat Darius once at Issus, went to the Battle of Gaugamela on the other side of the Tigris and Euphrates River, and Darius ran for it. They found him, apparently his own men found him so wounded in a cart, and they were just so disgusted with him for running away, they just killed him. Thing is, indeed. It is. So he strides into the palace at the capital of Susa. Among other things, he happens to observe a large statue of Xerxes. What did Xerxes do? He's the Thermopylae Salamis burned down Athens king. A statue of Xerxes thrown carelessly down to the ground in the confusion made by the multitude of soldiers pressing into the palace. He stood still, and accosting it as if it had been alive, "Shall we," he said, "neglectfully pass thee by, now thou art prostrate on the ground, because thou once invadedst Greece? Or shall we erect thee again in consideration of the greatness of thy mind and thy other virtues?" There is more than one cat. There is one cat that if you like, it will jump onto your shoulders and be a little fur muff around you. You can try this later. But at last, after he had paused some time and silently considered with himself, he went on without taking any further notice of it. But it is said that one of his father's friends wept in an old man's manner and deplored the misfortune of those Greeks whom death had deprived of the satisfaction of seeing Alexander seated on the throne of Darius. Yeah, take that, Persia. That was 150 years ago. Yeah, but you attacked us and burned down our city. Boom. We're sitting on your throne. Yes.
Man, Alexander the Great is just like a success story.
Yeah, good job, Alex.
He-
Tell the
I'm not-
Romans.
He is quite the success story.
Well, no, he just died of a fever.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Hold on.
Now the question is,
Rein it in.
now the question is, if Alexander the Great were to still be alive by the time the Romans came around, would he be able to beat them?
Ooh, historical mashup.
Might have.
With it never could have happened, but we can lay odds. So Alexander is now very, very wealthy. He basically has all the wealth of Persia at his command. And he starts being very, very generous to all his generals in his army. He's just share the wealth, However, it had a negative effect. This was the next question I asked you. Plutarch tells us, when he perceived his favorites grow so luxurious and extravagant in their way of living and expenses, that Hagnon the Tian wore silver nails in his shoes, that Leonatus employed several camels only to bring him powder out of Egypt to use when he wrestled, and that Philotas had hunting nets 100 furlongs in length, that more used precious ointment than plain oil when they went to bathe, and that they carried about servants everywhere with them to rub them and wait upon them in their chambers. He reproved them in gentle and reasonable terms, telling them he wondered that they who had engaged in so many single battles did not know by experience that those who labor sleep more sweetly and soundly than those who are labored for, and could fail to see by comparing the Persians' manner of living with their own, that it was the most abject and slavish condition to be voluptuous, but the most noble and royal to undergo pain and labor. Dudes, stop carrying specialty powder and oils around and having your own private butler to give you, massages. Maybe you should work out a little more, hit the gym a little more, and the bonbons a little less. But this is what happened. His guys became kind of soft, his generals, and also hoity-toity is the best word I can think of. Got a little big for their britches. Got a little like they could talk back to Alexander. Got a little mouthy, like they're his equals because they're as rich as he is, sort of thing. And it created, does that make sense? And created tensions. Another thing created tensions. This was the next question I asked you. How did Alexander try to bring Persia and Greece together? Do any of you remember? Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last year.
I don't remember, but I know from the book.
Take a guess. Oh yes.
What he would do is he made his Greek army bow down to him like the Persians did, but Greeks never bowed down to each other. But
Greeks don't like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Macedonian, so.
Well, technically he's Greek. I consider him Greek. But the reason that he did this was now he was ruling two completely different worlds. He had to find a compromise between them. He couldn't be a Greek ruling Persia anymore. He had to become a little bit of Persian in order to understand what they're going through, and then he wanted to create equality. Well, it's Persian subjects. It's Persian subjects bowed to him, so his Greek subjects were going to do the same.
Oh, well, that's equality backwards.
it's very hard to please everybody.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with cultural differences. So do you remember when we read about it was the Battle of Plataea? So just if you remember, Xerxes ran away after Salamis, but he left a guy named Mardonius in charge. And Mardonius said, "Just give me another summer. I'll clean this up." And he's like, "Good luck with that. See you later. You're all gonna die," which they did. But when they did, Pausanias was the Spartan general, and he went and he checked out the Mardonius' tent, and it was all silks and satins and cushions and everything. And if you remember the story, he had 2 meals made. He had a Persian meal and a Spartan meal. They're black broth, and this great Persian meal with pastry cooks and everything. And he said, these guys are complete idiots, because look, they eat and live like this, and they came and attacked people who eat and live like this. And so, but now, 150 years later, the table is turned. So Alexander starts out, I'm going to wear Persian clothes, my fancy duds, when I'm with the Persians. Then I'm just going to wear them all the time. Then I'm going to marry some Persian ladies. And then I'm going to have you guys marry some Persian ladies. And he's trying, but it's not going over well, because it's sort of like the story of, okay, your childhood friends, all right? I knew you when you were nothing, and now people are bowing down to you. He never was nothing, because his dad was the king. Okay, so I'm elaborating that in a little bit. But the guys who have been marching with him for a decade, like, yeah, really? People are going to bow down to you? We do not do that. We do not do that. And it really irritates, this whole way of life starts irritating his peeps. So the story of Clytus, this is not my exact terminology there. He had a friend named Clytus, and it says they had a dinner party. And do you remember this? All right, so here, just a second. Let me see where I'm going to, okay. The king, just a second, I'm going to read, okay. When they had drunk pretty hard. This I wanted to preface the whole story with, when they had drunk pretty hard. Some of the company fell a singing the verses of one Pranicus, which were made upon those captains who had been lately worsted by the barbarians, on purpose to disgrace and turn them to ridicule. So somebody made a cute little song about some Macedonian generals who actually got beaten by some Persians recently, and we're just going to make fun of them. This gave offense to the older men who were there. Remember, after they had drunk pretty hard. And they upbraided both the author and singer of the verses, though Alexander and the younger men about him were much amused to hear them, and encouraged them to go on, until at last Clytus, who had drunk too much, and was besides of a forward and willful temper, was so nettled that he could hold no longer, saying, it was not well done to expose the Macedonians before the barbarians and their enemies, since though it was their unhappiness to be overcome, yet they were much better men than those who laughed at them. And when Alexander remarked that Clytus was pleading his own cause, giving cowardice the name of misfortune, Clytus started up, this cowardice, as you are pleased to term it, said he to him, saved the life of a son of the gods. I saved your life, Alexander, when in flight from Spithridates' sword. It is at the expense of Macedonian blood, and by these wounds that you are now raised to such a height as to be able to disown your father Philip and call yourself the son of Ammon. He had drunk too much. And so their scuffle ensues. They're fighting. People are fighting. It's a fist fight. Clytus is running around. They're trying to get, like, dude, you need to just go have some coffee and sober up. Like, no! And he comes back in. And Alexander runs him through with a spear.
When they had drunk too much.
When they had drunk too much. This is important. Yes, important
I've
element
never
in this
heard
story.
that, like, from too hard.
So, no, none of you are the only one who read Henry V with me last year, right? No one else? Oh, you read Henry V with me. So, you remember there's a scene, Fluellen, it's totally fine if you don't remember any of this, but he's talking about Henry, and he's comparing him to Alexander the Great. Do you remember this? And he's Welsh, and he calls him Alexander the Pig. He's Alexander the Big, but it comes out pig, and it's sort of a dig at Alexander. It's a dig at Henry, and he said, well, Henry never did anything like Alexander. It's like, yeah, don't you know Alexander killed his friend in a fit of drunkenness, and Henry killed his friend too, Falstaff. He said, oh, we breed fine kings. It's a dig at this. This is a blot on Alexander, and it was a blot on Henry, too, that he ditched his friends, and one of them died of a broken heart. But anyway, so obviously Alexander's changing. Do you see what I mean? We had the temper. I don't need pastry cooks. I'm, temperate in my habits. And then he's telling his officials, you're living a little luxurious here. Maybe you need to tone it down a little bit.
And then he gets drunk and kills his
And then he gets drunk and kills his best friend. So Alexander is not done. He's at Susa. He has conquered the Persian Empire. But wait, there's more. There's more land to the east. That'd be east for you. Okay. And so he goes all the way to India. There's a map in there. I'm not going to look it up. India. The country of India. The Ganges River, India. Taking out group after group after group. Yes, sir.
Did they not realize that you could go even farther?
Well, they did, but his guys got ticked off. At this point, Alexander's game. Let's just keep going. Let's just find out what happens. At this point, they've been gone from home for, I don't know, maybe a dozen years. I know, and they're tired. Alexander, it's enough already. We would like to go home. Alexander also gets wounded a couple of times. He never stopped just going out and being in the front of the battle. He never got to the point where I'm just going to sit here on this hill back here and watch you guys go. He was just out there in it. He got spear wounds and sword wounds. Somebody hit him on the back of the neck with a big rock or something and knocked him out cold, and he was senseless for a while. It was rough, and so he needed something. So guys said, first of all, Alexander, you're going to get yourself killed. Second of all, haven't we gone far enough? Because we can't even rule all that we've conquered. Third, we would like to go home. So much to his dismay, he agreed, okay, we will turn around and go home. But he goes, okay, so now we're in India. All right, here's India. It's a little triangle. All right. And he says, well, I'm going to march overland back to Susa, but I'm going to send some of you on a boat, and you just go along the coast and find out what you can find out. Like, go exploring for me. And then they met up later, and he's like, shoot, I wish I had taken that trip. I could have conquered some cities on the coast. But by now, he is heading back. It says of an army of 120,000 foot and 15,000 horse, he scarcely brought back above a fourth part out of India. They were so diminished by disease, ill diet, and the scorching heats, but most by famine. He lost 3/4 of his men. I don't feel like that's a success story. I mean, it's a success in the fact that he didn't get killed and he conquered them. But of course, what do you think? As soon as he turns around and heads home, what are the people he's just conquered in India going to do? Yeah, just like, forget you. We can take out these guys that you left here. I don't even know. I'm assuming he must have left somewhere. But who wants to volunteer for that job? Oh, I'll be the person you leave a couple thousand miles away from home among a bunch of people that hate us. But he's going to volunteer for that job. And so these guys are just going to say, yeah, see you later, but we're just going to do our own thing now. He marches back to Susa. meets up with his guys who have scanned the coast. But when he gets back, he is not well. Oh, okay, I got to read this though. And this might tell you why he's not well. Oh, we got to find it. Oh, here we go. I love this. After 60 days' march, so he's on the way back, all right, he came to Gadrosia, where he found great plenty of all things, which the neighboring kings and governors of provinces, hearing of his approach, had taken care to provide. When he had here refreshed his army, he continued his march through Carmania, feasting all the way for 7 days together. He and his most intimate friends banqueted and reveled night and day upon a platform erected on a lofty, conspicuous scaffold which was slowly drawn by 8 horses. It's a party bus. They have a party bus. And they drink all the time. This was followed by a great many chariots, some covered with purple and embroidered canopies, and some with green boughs, which were continually supplied afresh, and in them the rest of his friends and commanders drinking, and crowned with garlands of flowers.
Flowers?
Endless drinking party.
They have a party bus, but they have a party train.
Oh, yes.
And the poor foot soldiers
Here-
slogging it.
Here was now no target or helmet or spear to be seen. Instead of armor, the soldiers handled nothing but cups and goblets and Theraclean drinking vessels, which along the whole way they dipped into large bowls and jars. And I'm pretty sure these jars didn't have water in them. And drank healths to one another, some seating themselves to it, others as they went along. All places resounded with music of pipes and flutes, with harping and singing, and women dancing, as in the rites of Bacchus. Described it as disorderly. The disorderly wandering march, besides the drinking part of it, was accompanied with all the sportiveness and insolence of the bacchanals, which is the proverbially wild celebrations of Bacchus, the god of wine, where women went out and it was a pretty wild time. Frat parties have nothing on bacchanals. So I don't think we need really to investigate why they're all so unwell by the time they get back to Susa.
Dehydrated?
I would think so.
Super dehydrated.
Yeah, look at Captain Jack Sparrow. His brain was boiling through all 3 of the movies.
Who's that?
You never heard of the Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah.
Oh,
but-
this makes me
Captain
so
Jack Sparrow
sad.
got stranded on an island.
This,
No water.
I'm starting to get so old. I say, you know this movie, that movie. You're like, no, we don't know that.
Only drink alcohol.
Ethan, you need to get your parents' permission first, but then you need to watch the whole Pirates of the Caribbean series, especially the first one, which is awesome. All right, okay. So,
Not too bad. Johnny Depp.
no, the first one is brilliant. Okay, I'm sorry. Love.
I had to say this.
Wait.
Captain Jack Sparrow was dehydrated the whole entire time throughout all the movies.
Oh yeah.
He drank alcohol, which doesn't help raise your water levels, and he was stranded on an island and got dehydrated.
No, it makes it worse. Alcohol would make it worse.
Alcohol does make it worse. Okay, all right. This has nothing to do with our. Okay, but it does. Alcohol, dehydrated. All right. So they got back to Susa, and at this point, Alexander has a fever. Okay, so now I don't know. Okay, dehydration, I don't know, but I also don't think chronic drunkenness gives you a fever. I don't know a lot about chronic
Fever comes
drunkenness,
from infection.
so I just
It's
don't
a-
know.
it's an infection,
Yes,
so.
so I feel like something was going on other than just deterioration of his health due to self-abuse. Also, he'd just been through a lot of wear and tear on his body at this point. Okay, so. The story is that he had a fever for a good week, 10 days. He had something lingering. All right, and he continued to have audiences, right, to greet people, to try to do the best you can, So imagine you got the flu or whatever, and you're trying. But he's already not in the best health. He's got a lot of wear and tear, and he's got something. And finally, I don't know, 7 to 10 days into it, he dies. Probably not coronavirus. He dies. So, in history books, you will see varying accounts of his death. Some people will say he drank himself to death. Okay, the drinking did not help. But I don't know that that gives you a lingering fever. He had something. Some people, and I like this, some people have postulated appendicitis.
It could
You know,
be, yeah.
because
I've heard of
you
that.
sometimes you have very, very sharp, severe pain. Sometimes you have a lingering ache. fever and just a general malaise. And also, if you're continuing to drink and eat, like that would exasperate it. So some people have said, we think Alexander actually died of appendicitis. Nobody knows. We're never going to know. But he died. And left an empire with no emperor. So I'm going back, and you can look at this when you get home, or not, it's fine, but this is where I'm getting my stuff from. He, supposedly, the story is that on his deathbed, just like the goddess of discord left that apple for the fairest, and then the goddesses start arguing, he leaves his empire to the strongest. Basically has a dying message that, good luck, may the best man win. Which just sets up, this is not a good thing.
Basically, my empire's gone.
Yeah, so you guys fight it out. We'll see who comes out on top. Good luck with that. And then he dies. So we have... Yeah. It was. So they divided it up. There wasn't actually right away a huge battle, all right? Because I think everybody realized to a certain extent that there is no way that large a geographical area can be managed. And the Romans are going to have the same problem later, right? To manage an enormous geographical area and that many people and that many cultures and cultural differences under one person. So we have Macedonia is a kingdom. We have Pergamum, which is sort of Turkey, is a kingdom. We have the Seleucid Empire, which is Syria, Persia, this area. Of course, this has fallen off because the Indians just are doing their thing. There's only so far east as go, but to Susa, to Babylon, all right, and then Egypt. And the Ptolemy family, Ptolemy was the name of his general that took over Egypt. This is why the Ptolemies rule Egypt. Cleopatra is a Ptolemy. These guys are Greek. They're not Egyptian. The rulers of Egypt under Rome are not Egyptians. They're Greek people. They're Egyptians living there, but the Greeks are in charge. But the problem is, he did have a Greek relationship. Indeed. As did Mark Antony after him. So Alexander left behind a pregnant wife, Roxana, who was Persian. And bless her heart, she and her son lived another 11, 12 years. They did not just get rid of them immediately, but they were always under house arrest. They were always detained. Do you know what I mean? We don't want you wandering, because technically this kid is the heir to Alexander's empire. But of course, if I'm one of the generals and their families, I don't really want this kid horning in on my business. I got my thing here, and I don't want you. And finally, they were killed, both of them. But they lasted for over a decade, which is amazing to me. This became the Hellenistic world. Okay, so Hellene is what Greeks call themselves. All right, they don't call themselves Greeks. Hellas is their name for Greece, and Hellenes are the people who live in Greece. So Hellenistic is Greek. The Hellenistic world spread from Greece. Also remember Italy. Southern Italy has Greek colonies, right? We talked about it earlier. All the way to the borders of India. All right. And they're all speaking Greek now. And they all have access to Greek culture, to the philosophers and the poets. And they are Greek civilization. This is the civilization that Jesus was born into. Right? It was now Roman. I'll connect the dots there in a minute. But this is why the New Testament is written in Greek. Because all these people spoke Greek. Every educated person in the East spoke Greek. It was the language of the world. This is due to Alexander. Some people say, well, was he just power hungry, or did he have a vision of a one world government where we're all just going to be one and we're going to speak the same language, have the same culture? We have no idea.
Zach, it's gonna happen. The body sex.
Well, I know, but like, but
Yeah,
run by
but we'll
man.
have a perfect ruler.
Yeah.
Run by man, impossible.
Yeah.
God
Yes,
said-
without divine
Yeah.
planning. Because we're just very different from each other, aren't we? It's hard to accept other people ruling over you.
Back before Babylon. Those don't say language.
Oh, yeah.
Not Babylon.
This is true.
Power Babylon.
Yes.
I
Which is Babylon, actually. What did you want to say, Jesse?
wonder what would have happened if the Romans crossed the ocean.
To North America.
Ooh, that's another matchup that will, the historical,
Or the
hypothetical
Romans crossed the
matchups.
Americans. Native Americans.
You know, because the Romans didn't have guns either. They were good at fighting. Some of the Indian groups were good at fighting.
I
You
think
don't know.
with their like fancy red armor, they'd stand out really well in the forest.
We'll have to have some sort of like, what do they call it? The pool, the betting pool for football teams and stuff? Like a
Oh,
fantasy.
Yeah, I gotta have an app for that.
Yeah, okay. So the Greeks, the Macedonian Empire, unfortunately, is ruling over Greece. But I would like to tell you that Greece learned its lesson and they started getting along with each other. This would not be true. They didn't ever get along with each other. And by the time, so Alexander died in 323 BC. It's very easy, at the age of 33. So it's all threes and twos, and it's just really easy to remember. 323 at 33. So by 212, okay, so it's about 110 years later. There's been 110 years of Greek cities fighting each other, and we have the Aetolian League and the Corinthian League and this league and that league, and they just can't get along, and the Macedonians are trying to keep control. In the meantime, the city-states, the Greek cities in Italy, have had some issues. And they just invited a Greek general over. His name was Pyrrhus. They're like, we just want you to attack the other Greek cities. And Pyrrhus famously won the battle, but lost so many men that he said, any more victories like that, and I'm done for. We call those Pyrrhic victories. When you lose so much, technically you win, but you lose so much in winning that you can't do that very many more times. So there'd been some comings and goings between Italy and Greece. But in, I don't know, around 212 BC, Carthage comes on the scene. They've already fought him once, but in the Second Punic War, Hannibal crosses the Alps, right, with his elephants. Who'd have thunk? And he starts rampaging in Italy. And Carthage, we'll talk about this next year, Carthage won't send him any reinforcements. He keeps sending home. It's like, I need, like, I've lost some guys. A bunch of my elephants are dead. And I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll get back to you. So he said, you know what? I'm sending guys to Greece. I'm going to go talk to the Greeks. We're going to get an alliance with Greece. We're going to say, hey, Greece, wouldn't you like to bring Rome down a notch? Why don't you send some guys over? Of course, Rome gets wind of it, and they go over to Greece, and they go to the other league, the opposing league, and say, they're getting Hannibal on their side, you need us. And the war with Carthage actually spreads to Greece. Problem being, sometimes once you invite people in, they never leave. So England did this once upon a time. They were fighting the Picts. They were the guys from Scotland. And they said, hey, Saxons, why don't you come and help us fight the Picts? Bad idea. Because the Saxons said, hey, we like it here. Let's go send for Uncle Joe and Aunt Mary, and let's just bring them all over. And the Saxons invaded England. And the Celts were done because they invited the Saxons in. So Greece did the same thing. They're inviting the Romans in. Like, oh yeah, we'll help you, but why don't you help us with these guys? We don't like these other Greek guys. You fight with us against them, and we'll help you against Hannibal, and we'll just all. you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So this is in 212-ish, okay, 210. In another 50 years, another 60 years, Rome just marches in and says, we've had enough of your fighting with each other. We come over and we help you, and then you turn your backs on us. You fight against us after you invited us in. We're just taking you over. And 146 BC, Rome says, hey, Greece, you're now a Roman province. You're under new management.
You're under new management.
In the same year that they destroy Carthage,
Dang, they're
in the
spirit.
Third War. Yeah. Corinth and Carthage went out in the same year. And then, of course, and this is next year, that whole Hellenistic world falls under Rome by Pompey, like 60 BC. Pompey goes to Judea and just takes over, and the whole thing is now a Roman province. But still speaking Greek, right?
And they learned Greek.
And Rome encounters a ready-made empire for them that's sort of uniform, all right, because they'd had a couple hundred years of all being Greek. So that takes us up to next year. That is the story of Alexander the Great. And I don't know, it's just unfortunate that we call people the Great. I don't know, I have mixed feelings about the epithet the Great for just taking over. Who else? There's a Peter the Great, right, in Russia. Who else is the Great? Is there another the Great?
Who was the England?
Alfred the Great.
Alfred.
He is great.
Yeah.
We give him that. He was fighting against invaders. He wasn't taking over. So we like Alfred. Well, but the other the greats,
Yeah, most of the greats in history aren't really that great.
no.
Or famous.
Yes.
Ivan the Great.
Or he's Ivan the
That's-
Terrible.
Yeah, there's Ivan the Great and Ivan the
Oh,
Terrible.
okay,
The
okay.
first one is Ivan the Terrible.
Oh,
second is
okay.
Ivan the Great.
Maybe he was just great because he wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
You know, it's like compared to terrible, he's
Wait a
great.
second, the terrible?
There's an Ivan the Terrible.
Yeah, Ivan
I'm not very good on Russian history, so
Russian
yeah.
history, we don't
I haven't
really
done
care.
Middle Ages yet.
I think he was like 14.
I need to brush up on
I
Middle
feel
Ages
like that's
history.
probably right. I'm not. The farther east we go, the more I'm like, yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Well, it's mostly the Greeks that wrote stuff down. Not a whole lot of other places wrote stuff down. So I mean, Greek
Not a lot of
history is the
places wrote
most
stuff down,
prominent
or we
because
didn't, or it was lost through time because people weren't coming and going so much. Okay, I'm going to turn this off. Goodbye, Wednesday people.